Support for Lab Out Loud is provided by the National Science Teachers Association, now celebrating its 75th year of supporting science education. Find out more about what NSTA has to offer at nsta.org. You're listening to the Lab Out Loud podcast, Science for the Classroom and Beyond. And in today's episode, we are talking to a guest who's going to guide us through the science of car crashes and vehicle safety.
Our whole rationale is that, well, let's see if we can reason with teenagers. Maybe if we can get to it through a different approach by looking at the laws of nature and laws of physics and say, listen, you can't argue with these laws, and let's see how they're really applied and what happens in a car crash. And maybe that can get them to change their behavior when they get behind the wheel.
That's up next on Lab Out Loud. But first, I'm your co-host, Dale Basler.
And I'm Brian Bartell.
And this is the last episode of Season 12.
12 seasons, and we are ready to come back in the fall.
Yep.
But before we do that, we have our last guest here. We've actually had him on the show before, almost a decade ago.
Correct, yes.
How many podcasts can say that? Almost a decade ago.
Yeah, we're old.
Yeah, we are.
Well,
in any case, yes, our child would be going into middle school next year if our podcast were a kid.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that's so crazy. Oh, yeah.
Well, depending on where you start middle school.
That's true.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, speaking of middle schoolers, they will... No, this is a terrible segue. I was going to say, speaking of middle schoolers, they'll drive
starting
someday.
To drive?
But I guess...
Hopefully down the line. So, 12 seasons now, and of course, we're going to take a break over the summer. So, if you have any suggestions for us to tackle come fall, please send us a line. Or if you want to just leave a comment on iTunes, we'd appreciate that as well. That helps people find out more about Lab Out Loud. In addition to that. But, it's the summer, so, hopefully we will have your ears as you are taking a car trip or you're mowing the lawn or you just want to avoid your own children's voices. Pick us up. We have over 200 episodes, right? Yes, but speaking of cars.
Yep. We just finished up Memorial Day weekend here in the United States, and that sometimes is a big driving day for people because they're driving from... a weekend getaway or things like that. But we know that people, not just teachers, but a lot of people are going to do different things over the summer. It's a road trip summer. And when you're on the highway, are you thinking about all those vehicle safety things? Well, our guest today wants not only us to be thinking about them, but most importantly, the students in our class to be thinking about them.
My name is Griff Jones, and I am a retired teacher and professor for over 30 years. 20 years I was in the classroom teaching mostly high school physics and a little biology, a little earth science, and then also working with the elementary program as an elementary science teacher. And then for the last 10 years of my career, I was a science education professor at the University of Florida.
I forgot that you were a classroom teacher. The last time we talked to you, do you remember when it was, Griff? March 8th. I'm pulling it up so it's easy to see. But 2010, so it's been a while. What has changed in highway safety or driver safety since that, in those 9 years?
Well, probably the biggest change is now we have the crash avoidance technologies that are coming out much more prevalent in the industry.
My dad borrowed a car, and he was talking about like it just automatically slowed down for him.
Right. So, that from where I'm sitting, as an educator and someone who's been working for a couple of decades trying to reduce the number of teen deaths on the highways, the sad story is still the number one cause of death of teenagers in our nation, and it's now becoming a worldwide problem. The World Health Organization has even listed that crash fatalities are one of the number one causes of death in young adults in the whole world. So that's... I
suppose as more and more countries grow, middle class expanding, more drivers, that's kind of a contribution to that.
All right, and they're saying, and the World Health Organization, they use their age ranges from ages 10 to 24, and typically in our nation that's reporting the teen fatalities, it's ages 13 to 19.
Okay.
But still, when I started teaching back in 1987 as a classroom teacher, teen fatalities per year for motor vehicle crashes was over 7,000. And it's come way down in the past couple of decades. And last records, 2017, indicated that the crash fatalities was down to under 3,000. It was like 2,700. Which is great, but it's still the number one killer of teens in America. And the CDC says almost six teenagers a day are dying due to motor vehicle crashes.
Wow.
So, and hundreds more are injured. So
your views on the crash avoidance then?
Well, it's a good thing, obviously. But, we still need to make sure we have we educate our teenagers to hopefully be more responsible drivers, to make better decisions when they're on the road, to not be distracted when they're driving, to not speed, to wear their seatbelts, and those sort of things.
What kind of technologies are out there? I mean, this is a teacher podcast, so none of us have new cars. So I say that tongue in cheek. So I know there's like I said, my dad had one that he borrowed a car or had a rental car that automatically slowed down for something that stopped in front of him. What else is out there?
Well, if you go to our new classroom website, one of the sections we have is on crash avoidance technologies. One of the, I think the most prominent one now is the frontal crash prevention. So where cars will, detect whether it's from radar, LiDAR, cameras, they will detect vehicles that are in front of them or even pedestrians, and then indicate, that there is something there. And then some of them even have the technology to actually start braking the car. So that's called the automatic emergency braking systems. So some of those have those as well. There's the ones, blind spot detection. I don't know if your cars have those. That's been out for a while and it's been proven to be very helpful. Where if there's that car in your blind spot, your sensors will detect it and indicate it somehow on the dashboard or in the side mirrors.
Oh yeah, our van does that. It squawks at you when there's a car in the blind spot.
Right. We also had there's also lane departure warnings, where the car typically with the cameras will recognize the center line and then also the solid white line on the passenger side. And if you start to go across either of those without turning on your turn signal, then it'll alert the driver somehow, usually by they'll feel it in their steering wheel or their seat will vibrate, or there'll be an audible or some sort of visual warning sign.
You mentioned this was at the website. Tell us more about the website.
So last time I think we talked, so that was back in 2010. That's the backstory here to the website. The only thing educationally that I had worked with the Institute on over my years, just on the side as a classroom teacher, when they asked for my help, was the two videos that we made and the accompanying teacher guides that went with them. So there was the Understanding Car Crashes is Basic Physics and Understanding Car Crashes When Physics Meets Biology. And we had two activity guides that went with that, even though a lot of that I pilot tested with my classroom kids, and we had them field tested all around the nation actually, and reviewed and so on. But a lot of people didn't know about them because they were files on the DVD, and so they weren't too easy to find. So most people just watched the video. And then when YouTube came along, then those activity guides and everything kind of really got lost because people just watched what was on YouTube, not realizing that there was any sort of teaching materials that went along with it.
Sure.
So
we still have that problem today. It's amazing.
Yeah, and they just watch watch whatever the video is, and there's no sort of instructional components woven into it, unless the teacher takes the time and works out whether it's some sort of activity sheet that goes along with it or whatever it may be. So that didn't sit well with me as an instructor. And
I want to say for the record, I used the materials. I had the
Yay!
I had the DVD, the physics one, and I did use the materials. We went into the materials that analyzed the two crashes. I think it was a 57 Bel Air.
Oh yes.
Yeah, and those
Excellent.
comparisons, and there were accompanying activities, and it was really good. But you're right, that happens a lot. People don't dig all the way.
No, and so particularly with the advent of YouTube, and so what I had been pushing for, and several people at the Institute have been pushing for, was for them to make a whole separate educational website that would link to their main regular website, and so that's what we started like 2.5 years ago now, and so in addition to having both of the videos and the activity guides as the backbone of the site, we also, wanted to put a lot of new content on there, something that would help the teachers, implement and the activities into their classroom, but also just give them a lot of different resources that they could, slip into their regular curriculum to supplement what they were doing in their classes. So we have an area where they have some demonstration videos where I'm trying to do some nice, quick, no more than 4 or 5 minute videos that are looking at one of the concepts that we talk about, whether it's momentum or energy, or looking at types of trauma and stress and strain on tissues. And we do I do a quick little demonstration that's usually a discrepant event that illustrates that. Mm-hmm. So we have those videos. We have the high interest crash videos like the Bel Air there, and we've gone ahead and in that case we've actually improved on it. We didn't have narration on that before, so now we've got narration on it, and I build in some instructional components in there to get the kids to do just a simple predict, observe, explain what's going to happen. So we have that, and then in that one too, we've included an instructional PowerPoint slides that I got from the Institute that show the sensor readings both on the chart form and then also on kind of a nice graph that shows the sensor readings both in the crash test dummy that was in the Bel Air and the crash test dummy that was in the Malibu. And so it's really powerful for students to see that.
Yeah, some of that was available with the DVD, right?
No, not that. That PowerPoint was actually on my university website. Okay. I had that there for a while, so you might have found it there. But no, we cleaned everything up, and we've put it on the website and make it easier for teachers to download.
Because I remember using that as a lesson for impulse and supporting the lesson on
Excellent.
Momentum and impulse. Yeah. And then we used to do a thing about it's actually great now because there's so much home delivery stuff about packaging, and all the different types of why not just build a really strong box, and kind of the history of cars there, where there was a time where we thought about making the strongest car because it could withstand a crash, and the pitfalls of that, because if you put your china in a steel box and ship it around.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yep.
So we're really proud of this site. So it's called it's IIHS in the classroom, and the website is classroom.iihs.org. And it's, again, the two videos are the backbone of the video, and we also wanted to give teachers options on how they show that video in their classroom. So with each video, they have 3 different viewing options. So, they can watch it from start to finish just as if they were on YouTube, or, have the DVD in there. And so they have the control of when they start and stop it. Second option is we added some pop-up little lower order quiz questions that have to be answered in order to continue in the video. So that's perfect for kids to do it for homework, individual work, in where it shows up, and people use the site in after-school programs, summer camps, engineering, challenging camps in the summertime, those sort of things.
Now, do the students have to sign in or anything, or they just we can just put this in like a Google Classroom or Learning Management, and they can link to it?
Yep. They don't have to sign in to no one actually has to sign in to get to the first layer. If you're a teacher and you want to get to the answer keys, to the lessons and everything else, then yes, we do ask you to sign in so that we can validate the teacher and so on. And then it's still all free. Everything's free. They can then get to the answer keys and all the additional resources that we have.
I think I bought that exact same plastic gutter to do the car crash test that's in there.
Oh, good.
Oh, nice.
Good.
Yeah. And then I hung it up on the ceiling, so I had it up. I'd have it in my room, hanging way at the top of the ceiling. And the kids for a long time are like, "What is the deal with that?" And I'm like, "All in good time, all in due time."
It'll.
Yeah, I like
elementary teachers use those for like basically bookshelves.
Yeah. And the 3 egg thing I've done, one thing I do with the 3 eggs is, and Griff, I'm sure you heard, but I'll put with the broom, and I'll make 1 beaker cotton, filled with cotton, and then 1 beaker with water, and 1 beaker with nothing in it, and then have the video. I have a slow-mo video of that.
Oh, great.
Yeah. And
that's nice.
That's always fun to do in class, but that's also a good one to have on video, because that's exactly what I do, is I would do it in class and then play the video of a previous one, because it doesn't always work perfectly,
Oh yeah.
you might flub it's hard to reset eggs. So
right.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that this has been out for 2 years. I imagine that some of you've even used like the term discrepant events, etc. Some of this is probably NGSS aligned.
Oh, yes, it all is. And we have the alignments from all the lessons on a document. Either they can get an Excel spreadsheet or just download the PDFs per lesson, however they want to do it. But, yeah, we have everything aligned to the NGSS standards.
Okay.
This is exploded.
So we have the last thing I said, we had
here.
3 options on the viewing. I don't want to forget the third one is that the teachers like the most is that we have each of the videos divided up into the segments that listed by their concept. So that way they don't have to, search around, fast forward, or do any of that, skip around. They can just, pull down, go to the segments that they want to show in class or segments and hit those. So we're trying to, design a website that is going to be a little bit more intuitive for the users, whether they're students or the teachers, something a little bit more powerful, more powerful online educational experience,
Sure.
and something that's at least a cohesive design that gives some sort of hierarchy for the users and makes for a better experience.
But that's also good pedagogy too, being able to control the video, stopping, starting it, giving a chance to talk about what is being seen on the screen. That can't be underestimated too. And now, we're seeing, obviously we've had smart boards for a while, but we're seeing interactive kind of televisions where the teacher can pause it and then annotate over the top of it. That lends itself to good pedagogy as well, instead of just playing a video and filling out a worksheet alongside of it. We can actually use it as an interactive tool.
Right, and that's what we were hoping for with this, and providing all sorts of different types of resources on here. So, and one of the spins that we did for the lessons that we're really proud of is that for each lesson, right now there's 11 lessons, but I'm in the process of writing 3 more as we speak that hopefully will all be out in the fall. But in addition just to having the lesson as a PDF, we realized, because we're all now spoiled by YouTube, that we don't like to read directions. We just want to watch a video that shows us, what to do or how to do it, or gives us some tips. And so for every activity, all 11 activities, we have 3 videos that come along with it. There are 2 student tips videos and 1 teacher tips videos.
Mm-hmm.
The student tips videos, there's an introduction and a conclusion. So in the intro, I'm only usually like 1 minute tops. I'm speaking to the students about the activity, just saying, hey, this is, have you ever wondered about this? Kind of opening it with a question and then saying, okay, that's what you're going to investigate today. Here, you're going to need these materials. Make sure you wear your safety glasses, and so on and so on. And then, all right, have fun, go to it. So I don't give them any answers. And then, and then on the site it says there's student direction. It says, okay, once you've watched the intro, then download the student activity sheet, the PDF, do the activity, and then when it comes time to start answering the analysis questions, if you need a little help, go back and watch the video clip, but also then you can watch the conclusion. So that's me at the last, 2 minutes. I'm saying, oh, hey, what did you get? Did you see this? Did you see this? Were you careful to do that? And each one, the most important part to me and the team at the Institute is that we relate that science concept to crash safety. Mm-hmm. I usually say, so what does this have to do with crash worthiness or crash avoidance technologies or whatever it may be? And so we're really proud to have those intro and conclusions, teacher tips, videos that we hope will really facilitate these activities being used in both formal classrooms and also informal settings, whether it's, in home situations or after-school programs or summer camps, whatever.
And then the 5Es I did see in the About section that they're 5E compatible also too, right?
Yes, we do. So that's how important it is. So the first E is engage, where you're hooking the student's interest. So even with the videos, when we made those, we start the videos with a question, right, to try to hook them. In one of the videos of what made a difference between, this driver walking away from crashing into the wall and this driver being carried away, right? Mm-hmm. So we want to hook them with some sort of questions and dramatic videos. The next E is to explore. And typically that's where the kids are doing the hands-on activities. So that's what the activities are for in the book. And then the third E is to explain. And so that's where you do your sort of mini lecture and to explain that science concept. And so that's where we have the videos for, where teachers can go to and the segments if they'd like, or, do a little mini lecture as part of the lesson. And then the fourth E is to elaborate, to connect those concepts to real world applications. And so in each of the activities, as well as in the videos, we always try to, elaborate and show what this has to do with, crash worthiness of a vehicle, and crash avoidance testing, and or in careers. And so, in fact, one whole section in the new classroom website is that we have an area. It's called Inside IIHS, and it's where we take the students and teachers behind the scenes at the Institute's Vehicle Research Center, so they can explore how the crash tests are done, and then also how the crash avoidance tests, and also research is done, how they actually do. And another one is all on the photography, how they, capture the crash footage, which is also, amazing. And they have to do that.
That's on the classroom site?
Yeah, that's on the classroom site. It's also on their YouTube channel as well.
Okay.
But I felt it was important enough that we wanted to sort of feature it in the classroom site. It's after the videos. It's down where it says more engagement videos after the activities. And it's called Inside IIHS. And they're perfect to use in the classroom. Either in the elaboration phase, but you can also even do it in the engagement, because it gets the kids kind of hooked. Because the kids always want to know, well, how do they get these cars? Do the manufacturers send them to them? And it's like, no, that wouldn't be a reliable test. If the manufacturer knew that was the car you were going to test, they could, beef up the suspension. No, they actually, they go and buy the Institute, it goes out and buys these cars randomly.
Are there like Institute secret shoppers, basically, that?
Yeah, exactly. So all the videos are relatively short. They're no more than 5 minutes. And
I noticed when you go to the video, though, this is what you were talking about before, how they're broken up. If you go to the video, it first says like it's 41 minutes, but don't look at that first one, because when you click on it, then you can see all the broken up parts, which is really nice, because you can go right to the one you want.
Right. Yeah. And we thought that's, I knew from being a classroom teacher, that's something I felt was useful, so I was hoping that everyone else felt that way. And so that's why we did that for both of those videos. And we tried to, chunk all of this. So whether it's the original 2 classroom videos, or whether it's the, behind the scenes tours, whether it's the Bel Air crash, whether it's the science demos, all of these are really short videos that teachers can, decide where they want to put them. And we tried to fashion them so that they would fit well into the 5E approach. So they could say, oh man, this would be a perfect engagement, a video, or an engagement, even a demonstration. So like the egg thing we talked about. So doing the eggs, or there's several others where I look at tissue trauma, or the one with a bowling ball, that swings out and comes back and doesn't hit me in the face. That standard one. So those could be actually used as engagements. And then using the activities as the exploration phase, and then going back to the classroom videos to do the explanation phase. Say, oh, well, let's go back and look at that clip on inertia or energy or stress and strain, to again kind of have that mini sort of lecture to explain what's going on. And then going to the inside IIHS for the elaboration phase.
Well, I kind of like the career option, as you mentioned, too, because like we said, we have all these new technologies coming into our cars. This is a good example of another career pathway for our students.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly. And then also there's the research video that's in the Inside IIHS. That's fascinating as well, because I learned so much about how they crunch the numbers that's coming from all these different sources, from all of the automotive insurance providers, as well as the government, from the NHTSA, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, and these CDC and all of this. They put these numbers together to figure out, what are the fatality numbers for teenagers, and then breaking that out from male and female, and the ages and the time of day, and the day of the week that the crashes are happening. All of this are breaking that out. So there are these researchers that are doing this, the statisticians that are figuring all this out. So there's just so many different avenues to make kids aware of potential careers.
That's excellent.
I even think about that when we talk about like the automation coming, and the instant piece that people think about is like, oh, it's going to take my job. And I said, well, perhaps, and definitely automation will take your job, but it also can create new avenues for careers and for other things as well. So even thinking about like driverless cars and all of the ethics that have to go into the programming, and of course, there's going to be driverless car lawyers coming out as well. So I mean, like there's a whole new kind of subset of
have you been injured by a robot?
Well, yes, we're going to have that, and we're going to have specialists for that as well. So I think that'll be an intriguing kind of like again, this is like the jobs that haven't been created yet, but are going to be similar to what we have, but just kind of like with a special like asterisk after them. Yeah, that's my prediction.
That's excellent.
Something else that now that we're excited about having the site up, and we've got new activities coming out in the fall, but we're looking forward to continuing to add like new demonstrations in that area, the crash science demos that we have listed. But one of the other things that we're working on right now, and when I say we, it's so neat to be involved with this team. It's not only the team at the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, their media production and operations department, but from my work at the university where I was at for the 30 years, in our College of Education, we have an in-house programming team, that builds web pages and works on, online learning and everything. And so I'm working with both of those teams to develop everything that goes on the site. In fact, I'm sitting at UF right now in a conference room that I knew had a nice phone line so I could talk to you guys.
Sure.
So one of the things that the UF team is working on, I said, well, we want to make what would really be nice. The kids are looking at all these videos, and we talk about what engineers do, and we talk about how they look at the pre and the post video footage, before the crash, after the crash. But wouldn't it be cool if they could actually do something like what the engineers do, even just a small piece of it? And so when I was at the Institute talking to one of the engineers, and he said, when we're looking at the crash footage immediately afterwards. One of the things that sometimes we'll do is just kind of look at the screen and, those crash stickers, the round ones that have the black and the yellow, right?
Yeah, you give them away at the booth.
Those, exactly. They put those, in very specific locations, and those help in post-production, it helps them to measure, the intrusion or how much, the car is deformed, both pre and post of the crash. And so I'm like, well, is that something that the students could do from the video that is in, that we're showing on the website? And they're like, yeah, I think we could do that.
Oh, wow.
So what we're working on right now, and then we're doing a whole different test. This is one that we don't even have on the educational website, is that they do what's called an underride test of the semi-trailers. So, the big semi-trailers you see on the road, when you're behind it, you see their bumper that hangs down, right? That's kind of level with basically your car bumper.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Those bumpers are supposed to protect you, that's in the car riding behind the semi, if they were to stop and you were to crash into the rear end of that trailer. That bumper is to keep you from underriding or going underneath that trailer.
Yeah, because they radically redesigned them. Because they used to be like decapitation machines, basically, for the car, cut the top of the car off.
Exactly,
Yeah.
but not all of them were redesigned as well as others.
Yeah.
So the Institute does underride tests. They bring in semi-trailers and put them in the middle of the crash hall, and then they propel the cars right into them.
Oh my gosh.
Into those underride, the guards. And so we've got great footage of that, and that's a perfect one to have the students do some measuring on both pre and post. Mm-hmm. So we hope to have that out in the fall too. And so that would be what I think would be a true interactive activity online that the students could work with. And so
that's
they
like
would
our fall
actually
sneak
take
peek.
they take the on-screen measurements, from just click and drag, on the screen from one of those crash stickers to the next crash sticker before the crash, and then they do it again after the crash and compare their measurements.
Why do those stickers look that way anyways? I mean, do you know any history as to how that became the sticker?
No, I have no idea. It's a good question. I think it's just highly visible, but and since it has the it gives them a center point that they can actually measure to.
Mark on.
But I don't have any idea why they put yellow and black.
Because it's become like the quintessential symbol for a crash test dummy and things like that. So
I know. You'll notice on the videos, I got a little carried away.
You got them on the cups, the top of the cup, the side of the cup. I'm surprised you don't have tiny ones cut on the marbles.
And then they were the guys, the film crew was like, "Oh, come on, really?" I'm like, "No, wait, we got to get some crash stickers on here." And so we put them on the egg when we're dropping the egg. We put them even on like when that Newton swinging wonder thing that clicks back and forth.
Newton's cradle.
We got a little. Yeah, the Newton's cradle. Thank you. We got the little hole punch and actually punched out, the center of the little crash stickers and put them on the.
Oh, that's how you did it. Oh, that's how you make small. Oh, duh. That's perfect. You can make tiny ones.
Mm. And you're hip to what the kids are doing because I see like there's some footage of like making some slime or some. I'm assuming non-Newtonian fluid is part of that equation there. Yeah. Yes. But all the kids are doing it. But I see my son. They still do this. I thought it was over, but it has seemed to kind of like had a renewal in our household of making slime and stuff. And again, and
I know
it's a great experiment, but at the same time,
I have a niece who's just wild about silly putty. She comes with all these different sort of recipes and things. And I'm like, oh, this is so cool. So I started reading up as I was in the second video on the one that when physics meets biology and talking also to some of the physicians we did for development of the video. They were saying how human tissue is viscoelastic. So it has some properties that act like a solid and like a liquid depending upon the type of stress it's under. And so, as I'm researching this, I'm like, well, what else is viscoelastic? And then I read, basically silly putty is.
Oh, sure.
And so it's like, holy cow, here we go. Mm-hmm. So on that activity, I started looking back at some of just standard chemistry activities, like, oh yeah, the good old borax and glue experiment.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it turns out if you vary the amount of borax in your solution, then you change the viscoelastic properties, or the stiffness, basically,
Mm-hmm.
the silly putty. And then in the activity, I wrote it up so that the kids would actually conduct, the stress test or a stretch test on their homemade silly putty. So they would make 3 different batches, each with a different concentration of borax, and so each one would give them different sort of properties when they put it under stress.
Mm-hmm.
And that's basically what's happening. When engineers are looking at how the body responds to trauma, it all depends on what type of trauma it is it what type of stress it is it coming from one axis, or is it on multiple axes that the stress is being applied, and then so they're doing these stress tests on human tissues, kind of similar to the silly putty activity.
I think I can hear it in your voice. How much do you love this work, Griff?
I do. I mean, this has been my passion now, for like 20 years. So
Sure.
Doing this with, I just started with my high school kids because I, wanted them to see the relevance of physics, and 2, I unfortunately had lost some students to car crashes, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like, okay, we're not going to do your standard egg drop anymore. We're gonna come up with something a little bit different that relates exactly to car crashes. It's not your standard egg drop. It's an egg drop that has some real world rationale to it.
Yeah. And that's something we talked about in the past too, is that I think you might have said there was research on, like, just telling them the facts out of, having some sort of context for the facts, in this case, the science behind it, helps these lessons, these things that, when they get behind the wheel, that they remember it and kind of take it to heart a little more.
Oh, exactly. That, in fact, I did my dissertation, years and years ago on the effectiveness of the videos and the activities on students' attitude, their knowledge, their attitudes, and their behavioral intentions to wearing seatbelts. And doing that research, you'd find that, that the old scare tactic videos that we probably saw in driver's ed, that is not as effective as it could be. And so our rationale is that, well, let's see if we can reason with teenagers, which can be a slippery slope anyway, as you know.
Whoa.
But
we're going to need to take a few months off and think about this.
Yeah.
And if many of you are going to, so there you go.
Right. So it's like, well, maybe if we can get to it through a different approach by going through the science classroom mainly and looking at, the laws of nature and laws of physics, and say, listen, you can't argue with these laws, and let's see how they're really applied and what happens in a car crash, and maybe that can get them to change their behavior when they get behind the wheel. And so, even in just my limited, teeny little dissertation, we found that it did work. That they changed in mine, it actually did change their knowledge. So they learned some good science. It didn't really change much their attitudes at the time about seatbelts. This was like 20 years ago. They still didn't really want to wear seatbelts or didn't like them.
Yeah.
But they said they would. So they changed at least their behavioral intentions. Now, I didn't go out there in the parking lot with binoculars and see if they really did, but they said they were going to. So, so at least that was a small victory.
Sure.
But I think that's just taken time, and that's now commonplace for just people in general. Like, you put your seatbelt on. It's not. It's not. We have to convince most of the old people to put their seatbelt on instead of the other way around in many situations.
Well, and seatbelts have gotten a lot more comfortable too.
Right.
Yeah.
So now I'm thinking about this going back to the crash avoidance stuff, because I think about that with seatbelts. They became mandatory. It was something that just kind of like, okay, we slowly over the course of a few decades, it became commonplace there. Are we going to see that with some of the crash avoidance technology? Like, what's the next thing that everyone's going to have going forward, or what do you see? What do you see as the most effective pieces of some of that crash avoidance technology?
Well, I think what seems like what's happened historically in the automotive industry is that the newest technology comes out in the most expensive cars, and so right, so you have to kind of wait for it to the automotive. know the rationale, whether they just because of they're trying to recoup their research costs. But either way, it seems like it takes a while for it to get down to the least expensive cars, and that seems to be accelerating. That timeline seems to be quickening. There's now coming. It's the new crash avoidance technologies are starting to appear more quickly in the less expensive cars, and I think that's because consumers are demanding it. And I think one reason that is, I'd like to think, is because of the work that the Institute has been doing over these years in raising the profile of awareness of a crash-worthy car, as well as the cars now that they test to avoid crashes. And so they've just started a whole new crash avoidance testing program at the Institute, and we have some pictures, and we talk about it on the new classroom website, where it shows their new dome that they built. They just built this huge outdoor covered testing area. This dome covers 5 acres of paved asphalt, and
5
underneath
acres?
the dome, 5 acres,
That is
largest
amazing.
in the nation, and
wow.
And that way they can do this crash avoidance technology testing year round, because this is the Vehicle Research Center is just outside of Charlottesville, Virginia. So they want to test during the winter as well, and they will build. I've seen this. It's so cool. They build these little facades of a city intersection. With the buildings and a crosswalk, and they now have these cool little robots that look like little pedestrians, like a lady pushing a baby cart that kind of rolls out in front of the intersection, and then they've got a car that's coming down, that has the crash avoidance technology and has the front sensors, and they see how well it actually detects and then brakes and stops and avoids the impact with the pedestrian.
Do they have one of those signs that has been so many days since our last robot was injured?
Yeah, right. And some of the first ones when I was talking to the engineers, and they're designing how to make these little, like sliding robots, because they do have to be able to be run over, because some of the cars don't stop like they're supposed to, and so they make it so that it's small enough, it's like a skateboard almost, that can be run over by the car, and just there's like a foldable portrait, profile of the pedestrian that just, lays flat and then pops back up. But
okay.
So yeah, it's fascinating, and so that's another part that we wanted to introduce students to on the website. So we've got a whole section under additional highway safety topics that talks about how cars can avoid a crash, and there's a great video in there that explains this whole new chapter in the testing of vehicles by the Institute.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, we even have that in our About tab in the About IIHS. There's a video called A New Chapter for IIHS Vehicle Research, and it's so powerful because they start out actually talking to elementary and middle school kids about crash safety, that they just did some random focus groups at some schools. And it's just interesting how the kids are aware of how it can be dangerous to ride in a car and how important it is to wear your seatbelts and things. So it was just a great way to start the video. And so if you have a chance, I definitely encourage you to watch that.
Yeah, we'll take a look into that. It's amazing, too, because even in just 10 years, the cost and availability of things like sensors and cameras has gone down tremendously and become so much more available. So why not put them in your car? Right. And that's some of the lessons that I want to work towards, or the demonstrations we want to talk about too. It's just some of that new technology that, based on things that the kids can see in the classroom, like even your little pin laser lights, to start talking about LiDAR, which is kind of like radar but with lasers, right? So it's and even just with optics and cameras and how the different auto manufacturers are using them. These are different systems, and some of them perform differently than others, and so no one is out there right now really testing it, except for the Institute that I know of.
that is looking at how well each of these systems, respond to, the crash avoidance scenarios.
Has there been any discussion about the reliability of those systems in the long term? And I asked this because I just listened to a podcast from Radio Lab called the Bit Switch, the Bit Flip, and basically they talk about how cosmic rays can actually interfere with random bits in our computer data, and that can actually cause problems. And they were making the claim that this was probably part of the problem with some of the systems in the early Toyota, the Priuses that couldn't stop. And
really?
It's a fascinating listen. And basically they said the goal, then you just have many backups of these systems. And so
redundancy, sure.
Yeah, the redundancy is important that way.
Exactly.
It's fascinating to listen to, just in that part alone, because I think about how much we are relying on electronics for some of these systems that take it out of our hands.
Yeah. Well, and one of the redundancies is, well, I don't know. I mean, is one of the redundancies going to remain the human, or is the human just going to sit on it and be passive eventually? Because I'm reading this book called Radicalized, and it's sort of a dystopian forecast of the future. Cory Doctorow has these 4 short stories, and one of them talks about you get into these cars in the future and they're autonomous, and really you just have to trust that vehicle to get to not murder you.
Right.
Because you're going in, and the thing is, we do a lot of that. I mean, we trust
your Robopocalypse is showing, Dale.
Yeah. But I think when you explain some of the things, like expanding some of the lessons that we've already done here, but into how these sensors work, that also allows students to understand the limitations of these kind of tools and how to work with those limitations. Oh,
absolutely.
Griff, you live in Florida. I'm guessing the lanes can fade. For lane markers can fade away. Up here, they can get covered in snow and ice. Just different things like that.
Exactly. I think that's an important point to make to the students, that there's also a difference between seeing and perceiving, and so these sensors can be, if conditions are right, like you just said, they are very well at seeing out there, because they're using multiple systems, whether it's the cameras and the LiDAR and so on, with all these redundancies. But if so, seeing is one thing, but then making perceiving what you're seeing is another step, and that's where the algorithms are coming in, right? So, and we do that just in a fraction of a second, and we have all of our prior knowledge that helps us figure out what we're seeing on the road and trying to second guess what's coming and so on. But but when we turn that over to a machine, then you're right. There's that level of trust that it's not really, it's tough for us to give that up, right? Yeah. So I think a lot of the with good reason. So I think a lot of what the auto manufacturers are doing, those that are working on autonomous vehicles, is that they're trying to take it in small steps.
Sure.
What are those areas that we can feel a little bit more comfortable handing over to autonomous systems? And I think so, but I think as we get more and more comfortable and the technology gets better, then and all the support system that has to go around the car, like you said, proper lane markings, it's great on the highways, and that's why one of the first probably implementations will be with the trucking companies that go from, a well-designed point A to point B, from the factory to the distribution center, which is, on main highways, and then, so everything's really well marked. But going into a neighborhood that's poorly marked, or going into a parking lot, those are much bigger challenges.
So the school drop-off parking lots are not going to get any easier for a long time.
Right. Exactly.
Those are always a disaster. Well, I think before we let you go, this is our last episode of the season 12, we mentioned. summer vacation approaching. Going to be people doing a lot of road trips, possibly. I myself have a 15-year-old that's going to be coming up doing 15 and a half, ready for driver's ed. I have one driving already, a 17-year-old, and then
a lot of kids on the road,
and then a real close, another 15-year-old. What are the is there something that you want these drivers to kind of keep in their heads right now as they go into the summer for these road trips or for these teens doing their first driving?
Probably the number one is to not be distracted.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's something that I think drivers of all ages, have faced that challenge. There's multiple distractions, not just, I think obviously the cell phone is probably one of the biggest, particularly if they're trying to text. But, everything from, eating to combing your hair to messing with the radio or your iPod or whatever.
Or all the new
it may
gadgets
be,
that are in the car that have been put in the car.
Or the air conditioning or the navigation system, any of those things, take your eyes off of the road. And so that is probably one of the most dangerous things. And so when you have teenagers that are, both inexperienced and immature, typically, that's a deadly combination to put those two things together and then to throw in distractions.
Sure.
So if you can at least eliminate the distractions and stay focused on the road, then I think we'll all be safer.
Excellent. Well, the website, the dedicated website now to classrooms for IIHS is classroom.iihs.org. Griff, thanks again so much for talking to us, and we hope our listeners check out the website. There's a lot of materials there.
Oh, well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks much.
Thanks so much for your interest in the website. I'm really excited for you guys to use it.
If you'd like to learn more about today's episode, head on over to our website, laboutloud.com, for more information. You can also find details about all the previous episodes, and you can leave us feedback and comments. We want to hear from you.
If you enjoyed the show, make sure you've subscribed on iTunes, Google Play Music, or your favorite podcasting platform. And if you really enjoyed it, consider leaving us a rating or a review. Your feedback helps others find our show.
If you like Lab Out Loud and you love the show that we provide for you, please consider supporting the show at our Patreon page. Head on over to patreon.com/laboutloud for more information. Until next time, I'm Dale Basler.
And I'm Brian Bartell.